Have you ever wondered how a single gunshot could plunge the entire world into a catastrophic war? Today, we're diving deep into the story of World War I, a conflict that redrew the map of the world and changed the course of history forever. Where did it all begin, and how did it finally end? Let's find out. To understand World War I, we need to go back to the early 20th century. Europe was a powder keg, a complex web of alliances, ambitions, and rivalries. On one side, you had the Triple Entente: France, Russia, and Great Britain. On the other, the Triple Alliance: Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. These weren't just friendly agreements. They were military pacts. If one nation went to war, its allies were bound to join in. Beyond these alliances, there were other powerful forces at play. Imperialism was one. European powers were scrambling for colonies in Africa and Asia, leading to intense competition and friction. Nationalism was another. People across Europe felt a fierce pride in their countries, sometimes leading to desires for independence or expansion. Just look at the Balkans, a region often called the powder keg of Europe due to its volatile mix of ethnic groups and competing interests. Then there was the arms race. Countries were building up their armies and navies at an unprecedented rate. Germany, a rising industrial power, was challenging Britain's long-held naval supremacy. This military buildup created an atmosphere of suspicion and tension. Everyone was preparing for a war that they believed was inevitable. The spark that ignited this powder keg came on June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was visiting the city with his wife, Sophie. As their motorcade drove through the streets, a young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip stepped out from the crowd and fired 2 shots. Both the Archduke and his wife were killed. Why did this happen? Princip was part of a secret society called the Black Hand, which wanted to free Serbs living under Austro-Hungarian rule and unite them with Serbia. The assassination was a political statement, a desperate act to achieve their nationalistic goals. Austria-Hungary was outraged. They saw this as a direct attack by Serbia and issued a harsh ultimatum, a list of demands that were nearly impossible for Serbia to accept fully. When Serbia couldn't meet every single demand, Austria-Hungary declared war on July 28, 1914. This is where the dominoes began to fall. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of the Slavic people in Serbia, mobilized its army to support them. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, saw Russia's mobilization as a threat and declared war on Russia. Then, Germany declared war on France, Russia's ally, and enacted the Schlieffen Plan. This was a military strategy to quickly defeat France by invading through neutral Belgium, before turning to fight Russia in the east. Britain had a treaty to protect Belgium's neutrality. When German troops marched into Belgium, Britain had no choice but to declare war on Germany. And just like that, within a few short weeks, the great powers of Europe were at war. What started as a regional conflict had spiraled into a global one. The world would never be the same. When the war began in 1914, most people thought it would be over by Christmas. Young men enthusiastically signed up, fueled by patriotism and a sense of adventure. But the reality of this war was something no one could have imagined. The romanticized idea of cavalry charges and swift victories quickly gave way to a brutal, grinding stalemate. On the Western Front, which stretched from the Swiss border to the North Sea, both sides dug in. They created a vast network of trenches, separated by a desolate, dangerous area known as No Man's Land. Life in these trenches was horrific. Soldiers faced constant shelling, sniper fire, and the threat of poison gas attacks. They lived in mud and filth, surrounded by rats and disease. Battles like the Somme and Verdun became infamous for their staggering casualty counts. Millions of men were sent over the top, charging into a hail of machine gun fire for just a few yards of land. This was a new kind of warfare, one of attrition, where the goal was simply to wear down the enemy through sheer numbers. The war wasn't just fought in the trenches. The new technologies transformed the battlefield. Tanks were introduced, clumsy and unreliable at first, but they signaled the future of armored warfare. Airplanes, initially used for reconnaissance, soon engaged in dogfights in the skies. Submarines, or U-boats, prowled the oceans, sinking supply ships and bringing a new dimension to naval combat. While the Western Front is the most famous, the war was a global conflict. On the Eastern Front, the fighting between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia was more mobile, but just as brutal. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire, which had joined the Central Powers, fought against the British and their allies. Battles were also fought in Africa and Asia as colonial powers clashed. The war also had a profound impact on the home front. With so many men away fighting, women stepped into roles they had never held before, working in factories, on farms, and as nurses. Governments took unprecedented control over their economies, rationing food and supplies, and using propaganda to maintain public support for the war effort. The war demanded total commitment from everyone, not just the soldiers. For years, The conflict ground on with no end in sight. The enormous loss of life and the immense economic strain were taking their toll on every nation involved. But two key events in 1917 would dramatically change the course of the war. The first was the Russian Revolution. Years of devastating losses and internal turmoil led to the overthrow of the Tsar. The new Bolshevik government, led by Vladimir Lenin, wanted out of the war. They signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany in early 1918, officially pulling Russia out of the conflict. For Germany, this was a huge victory. They could now move all their troops from the Eastern Front to the West for one final, massive push. But the second event would ultimately seal Germany's fate, the entry of the United States into the war. For years, the US had remained neutral. Though it supplied the Allies with weapons and goods, public opinion began to shift after incidents like the sinking of the passenger ship Lusitania by a German U-boat. The final straw was the Zimmermann telegram, a secret message from Germany to Mexico, proposing an alliance against the US. Intercepted and published. It caused outrage. In April 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. The arrival of fresh, well-equipped American troops, known as doughboys, gave a massive boost to the exhausted Allied forces. At the same time, Germany launched its spring offensive in 1918, a desperate final gamble to win the war before the full might of the US could be brought to bear. Initially, the offensive made significant gains, but the Allies, reinforced by the Americans, held. Then, the Allies launched their own counterattack, the 100 Days Offensive. Using coordinated attacks with infantry, artillery, tanks, and aircraft, they began to push the Germans back. The German army, depleted and demoralized, started to collapse. At home, Germany was also falling apart. The British naval blockade had caused severe food shortages, and the German people were tired of the war. Sailors mutinied, and strikes and protests spread across the country. Seeing that the war was lost, Germany's military leaders advised the Kaiser to seek peace. Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated and fled the country. A new German government was formed, and they agreed to an armistice, a ceasefire. At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, the guns on the Western Front finally fell silent. The Great War was over. The aftermath was staggering. Over 16 million people, both soldiers and civilians, were dead. Empires that had stood for centuries, the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman, the Russian, and the German, were gone. The map of Europe was redrawn. In 1919, the victorious Allied leaders met in Paris to negotiate the peace. The resulting Treaty of Versailles placed the blame for the war squarely on Germany, forcing it to pay crippling reparations and accept severe military restrictions. This war guilt clause would foster deep resentment in Germany and plant the seeds for another, even more devastating conflict just 2 decades later. World War I was a watershed moment in human history. It shattered old empires, introduced terrifying new ways of fighting, and set the stage for the political landscape of the 20th century. From a single assassination in Sarajevo to a global conflict that reshaped the world, its legacy is a powerful reminder of how quickly tensions can escalate and the devastating human cost of war. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments what historical event you'd like to see us cover next. See you in the next video.